Hello, Rune Scholar, wherever and wherever you are. I'm the modern Erilar. In my last episode on younger Futhark runes in Sweden, I mentioned that the Swedes traveled through Latvia and down the Volga and the Don rivers to found the Principality of Kyiv in what is now Russia and Ukraine. Our main evidence for this contact is comprised of two groups of finds: Scandinavian memorial stones commemorating voyages to the eastern Baltic, into Russia and Ukraine and Byzantium, and inscriptions on movable objects recovered in Eastern Europe. Let's discuss the runestones first, to provide some context for Viking colonization in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, known to the Swedes as the austrvegr, or Eastern Way. Out of about 3,500 runestones in Scandinavia, about 120 mention Eastern Europe or Byzantium, compared to only about 30 inscriptions that mention Western areas like England or Iceland. The vocabulary used on the runestones tells us that members of retinues gave battles and fought as captains or commanders, so contact usually took the form of raids or other expeditions for financial gain. For example, the fragmentary Goldersta stone gives us the phrase austrvegr, or Eastern Way. The Kista stone tells us that the person for whom the stone was raised died in Holmgard in Olaf's church. Holmgard being the contemporary Scandinavian name for Novgorod, now a city in northwestern Russia on the Volkhov River, and first mentioned by the St. Sophia First Chronicle in 859. The Turinga stone tells us that Thorstein fell in battle in the east in Garðar, the contemporary name for the region of northwest Russia, and that he was a commander of the retinue. The Berezan stone is the only runestone recovered from this region, found on an island near the mouth of the Dnieper River in Ukraine. In the inscription, Grani commemorates his business partner, Kal or Karl, in short twig runes with a dotted I for an E, which, if you recall episode 10 on dotted runes, means that this inscription cannot be earlier than the late 10th or early 11th centuries. We know of extensive trade activity in this area by Scandinavians who sold boats and lumber in Byzantium, brought furs and walrus ivory, and traded enslaved persons along these routes for financial gain. Accounts also survive from contemporary observers from other cultures. If you've read Michael Crichton's novel Eaters of the Dead, or seen its film adaptation The 13th Warrior, you're familiar with a heavily fictionalized retelling of an account by Ahmad ibn Fadlan ibn al-Abbas ibn Rashid ibn Hamad, an ambassador of the Abbasid Caliph, who observed several distinct populations in this region during the 10th century. The Russian primary chronicle also tells us that northerners served as mercenaries in the armies of the princes of Kyiv, Novgorod, and Polotsk. You may also be thinking of the Varangian Guard, formed by the Byzantine Emperor Basil II in 988, which survived in some form until the 15th century, though other detachments of Scandinavians also served in the Byzantine armies in the late 10th century. We therefore have evidence of trade, raiding, and foreign military service by Vikings in this region. The Russian language even inherited some words that were specific to trade from the Vikings. For example, the Swedish word torg became the Old Russian targa, both of which mean market or square. So, what runic inscriptions did these Vikings leave behind? While runic inscriptions show Scandinavian activity in this area, the runic finds are relatively few. They concentrate in the region of Ladoga Ilmen, the earliest area visited by Scandinavians. The oldest of the finds from the Viking Age are graffiti on Arabic coins from the 8th to mid 10th centuries with words like God or one of the names of Odin. At most, 12 of these were found in Russia or Ukraine. Compare this with similar inscriptions on about 1,000 coins recovered in Scandinavia. Then we have a 9th century wooden distaff from Staraya Ladoga, a settlement referred to in the sagas as Aldeigjuborg. The 48 runes are similar to those on the Rök runestone, which I described in episode 3. So these runes from Ladoga are very similar to those from Östergötland in Sweden around the year 800. There's very little agreement among runologists about where individual words separate or what exact bind runes appear in this inscription. But the repetition and alliteration present have led the greatest consensus to be that it is a line of skaldic verse with poetic imagery. I happen to like Yuri Kuzmenko's translation with imagery that relates to spinning. From here, though, the situation gets more complicated. So there also survive 3 very similar amulets, one from Ladoga and 2 from Gorodice. The Ladoga amulet is the oldest, with a 9th century inscription offering protection on a journey on one side, and an early to mid 10th century invocation for strength on the other. The basis for these runes is again very similar to those from around the year 800 on the Rök runestone, but the twigs of these runes are bilaterally symmetrical or mirrored around the stave. So these amulets are some of the only examples of an inscription being written completely in mirror runes. It's quite difficult to read, but we do see words like Unther or hockey or runar, which definitely appear in several or many other runic inscriptions. The 44th rune, you might recognize, looks an awful lot like an Elder Futhark Dagas, and number 22 might be an Elder Futhark Wunjo, both of which would be very early runes indeed. There are also early long twig variants of the M rune, the H rune, and a nasal A as well in this inscription, alongside 3 mirror variants of a short twig N and 6 versions of a short twig A as well. So this is probably pretty strange already, but one of the really strange variants here is what looks like might be a combination of long and short twig runes with 2 branches at the bottom, like in long twig runes, for an ending R rune, but the stave is only half height. So the totality of this inscription is pretty bizarre, though given that it probably has some sort of magical intent to it, the obscurity may be deliberate. Then we have a truly bizarre find from Novgorod from the first quarter of the 11th century. 32 rune-like symbols appear in boustrophodon, or lines that alternate in being read from left to right and then right to left. A few of the symbols do seem to be short twig runes typical of the 11th century, but other signs cannot definitively be identified as runes. Many look like reversed runes. Number 21 looks like it might be a Kaun. Number 23 might be a Fehu. Some of them might be bind runes. Number 2 there might be urus plus naudis put together so that the twig comes off the urus. But this inscription defies clear interpretation in any realm. The increasing strangeness in the runic finds over time may indicate that Swedish Vikings acculturated quickly in this part of the world. Cyrillic runicy quickly overtook runic literacy after the conversion to Greek Orthodox Christianity on the part of the Rurik dynasty that founded the Principality of Kyiv, and only the first 4 rulers of that dynasty, Hrolrekar or Rurik, Helgi or Oleg, Ingvar or Igor, and Helga or Olga, had Scandinavian names. So with that caveat, that we have very sparse distribution of runic finds, both geographically and chronologically, so it's difficult to make strong conclusions, and that the period of runic use was relatively short, what might the Kyivan Rus Futhark have looked like? Thankfully, we do have most of one surviving Futhark inscription. This rune row appears on a pig bone from Novgorod from an early 11th century context, but it is missing the first 5 runes of the Futhark because the bone is damaged. This is a pretty standard long twig Futhark. And if we look at the individual runes from the Staraya Ladoga distaff, this is the resulting Futhark from that inscription. Some of these runes, like the T and the M runes, are my conjecture, and I base the runes that I've represented here on my comparison among other scholars' transliterations and the highest resolution images to which I've had access. This is, however, definitely a short twig Futhark because the N and the A runes are very clearly carved. The result isn't quite like any of the Futharks that we've observed so far. Another group ventured out to Garðariki, the Vikings of the Baltic island of Gotland. So let's discuss their runes in our next episode. Thank you for reading the runes with me, the Modern Erilar.